So today I'm going to be doing a review of the Huda Beauty Neon Obsessions, the trio. So that's the green, the pink and the orange. I talked a little bit about these when I was going through my makeup collection, but today I'm going to be giving some more in-depth kind of thoughts about this. I've taken some videos of swatches of each of the palettes, and here we have Kat again. Cece is here. Do you want to say hello? Hello? Hello, say Kat. She's helping. So we're going to go first to the swatches of the videos, or swatches of the eyeshadows, so you can kind of get an idea of what they look like. So we're going to start off with the neon green Huda Beauty eyeshadow palette, which looks like this, and I'm going to start off by doing some finger swatches on my arm. Then I'm going to use the Sigma E60 large shader brush to actually do some swatches using a brush, and then I'm going to use the NYX eyeshadow base eyeshadow primer and lay that down, and then use the E60 to put some swatches on top of that, so you get an idea of what the palette actually looks like with and without a primer. So we're going to start off first by doing the finger swatches. So I'm really trying to dig in, because you're going to see that there's very little colour payoff. Now it looks okay-ish on the fingers, but then when you actually apply it to the skin, you'll see there's not a lot of colour payoff. So that's the first 4 colours. Now the next 5. And I haven't had this that long, but I've already dug in a fair bit to this, because to get any sort of pigment off this, you really do seem to have to dig in, which isn't great considering how expensive this actually is. And then there's just one more shade, which is this one here. So I'm going to dig into that and see how that swatches. So that's the finger swatches of the eyeshadow palette. So what I'm going to do now, like I said, is take the E60. And I have a Vera Moda colour switch that I can use in between each swatch, just so it's not getting kind of contaminated by the other colours. So that's the brush swatch. I am by no means light-handed with eyeshadows. I tend to be, particularly with this formula, you don't really seem to get much from it. As you can see, there's a lot of kick up as well. Just a lot of fallout. Sorry, they're not in a perfect line, but you know, there you go. Yeah, not a lot of colour payoff. Yeah, so that is you can see there's a little bit of fallout there from the eyeshadows. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to use the NYX base. I'm going to put that down, just nothing fancy, just going to kind of clean this up a little bit.
just going to wipe it along my finger because honestly I can't tell where I'm going to put these swatches. It's really funny because when you put down the NYX eyeshadow base, it looks an awful lot like pseudo cream. So I've put that down. So that's our base. They perform a little bit better with a base, so I would say if you feel absolutely 100% compelled to get this, you can't go without a base. It won't perform without a base. And actually even just trying to use brushes with it, it doesn't give you quite the payoff you'd look for. Probably a bit of contamination there, but sure, look, it'll do. They don't blend that well. So I'm hoping you can kind of see there, those are the finger swatches up at the top. They give you the best pigment, but obviously that's not how you generally tend to apply your eyeshadows, unless you're me. Sometimes I do use fingers. The next then is the brush. You can see that just does not give you really any pigment. If you need any pigment at all, you need to have like a pale eyeshadow base to give you something.
So as you can see kind of from the swatches video, it takes an awful lot to get any sort of pigmentation from this green palette. I don't know how well the camera can pick this up, but I have taken a big chunk out of this white colour to get any sort of pigmentation from it at all. My general thoughts on this are that it just isn't the same formula, the same standard that I'm used to in terms of Huda Beauty. I think there's a lot better out there. I don't think it's worth £27 at all. There seems to be a large inconsistency in terms of the formula and in terms of the blendability. Usually with a 9-pan palette, particularly if it's a little bit more monochromatic, you need to have more level, more depth, more kind of variation in terms of colour to get anything, but this is all very one note, so it's very hard to get anything other than one particular look with this. So given the price, given the pigmentation that you're actually getting out of it, I couldn't recommend to get this at all. So skip on this. That's my general advice.
So the next one we're looking at is the Huda Pink Neon. So this is what it looks like inside. There are quite a few shades that look similar, but you're going to see that now in a minute. So like I said, we're going to do the finger swatches, the brush swatches, and then brush with a primer. Okay, so first the finger swatches. Like I said, I tend to dig in when I'm doing finger swatches, so this is probably even more pigmented than it would generally look. Much better payoff than the green. You can see those two shades look identical. Think before you produce, Huda, and make sure that you have shadows that are at least somewhat different to each other. So that's the first four. These swatch, I don't know if that they used a completely different formula when making this one, but the pink one, much better in terms of swatching, much better in terms of pigmentation than the green one. I think the green one, frankly, is a dud. This is much better. So that's the finger swatches. Like I said, you can see those two shades, super similar. We're going to do the same thing now where we're using the E60 brush just to see what a brush swatch looks like. That still gives you pretty good pigment, so that's nice. This is much more what I'm used to in terms of a Huda formula. Yeah, even there you can get even better pigment with the brush than the finger swatch, which is unusual. And I haven't wetted this or anything, just this is a dry brush application. Like I said, those two colours, indistinguishable. I can't tell the difference. And normally I would be big into kind of going, oh, there's a major difference between these shades of pinks, but I can't tell. So you can see that swatch is okay. I think the main thing you notice with this palette is there isn't enough kind of colour variation. And although it is a monochromatic palette, you really should have more variation in order to build a look with depth and dimension. And this is all very, very one note. Granted, now a much better formula and a much better kind of pigmentation than the green palette, I'll give you that. It does look a lot better in terms of the swatches than the last one. So now what we're going to do is use our eyeshadow base. So I'm going to quite liberally kind of just shove that all over my arm, because, you know, that's what I do. Okay, so this will give you an idea. Gives you a slightly different colour, which I don't think the camera can 100% detect, but it gives you a slightly more pinkish colour with the eyeshadow base. It does have a tendency to kind of clump together. So the blending isn't fantastic. Similar sort of issue that we were seeing with the green. Again, those two colours, identical. They might as well have just made an 8-pan palette. It would have made a bit more sense almost, rather than having two shades that are exactly the same. Can see they are swatching quite well, like much better than the green one. There we go. I don't have a big enough arm to swatch. You lose a certain amount of the kind of glittery here. You see it much better in the brush swatch than when there's a pigment down underneath it, or a base rather. So something to keep in mind. Similar performance. So that gives you a general idea of kind of what it looks like with finger swatches at the top, brush swatches, and then brush swatches with a base.
The pink palette is definitely a lot better in terms of pigmentation than the previous green palette. But like I said, within the swatches, these two shades, so this one here and this one, swatch exactly the same. And then as you can kind of see in terms of the shimmers, there's this shimmer and there's this matte here. It's very difficult to get any sort of difference in terms of your eyeshadow look. So again, although the quality is a little bit better than the neon green, given the amount of eyeshadow looks that you could actually get from it, again, I don't think that £27 is in any way worth the price for this particular palette. So if you've been looking at this, I would suggest skip on it, find something else, or if you can find it in a sale, then maybe if it's like half off, maybe then get it. It might be worth it then. But for the full retail price, definitely not.
So we're now on to the neon orange. So we'll start off with our finger swatches. My poor brush is absolutely disgustingly filthy at this point, so I'm going to have to wash it straight after this. There we go. Or I'll just put it like that. There we go. Much easier. So those are the first 4 shades. I think out of all of the 3 palettes, the orange one is the best. And I think not just in terms of the colour story, because the colour story I think is much more interesting in the orange palette. This is interesting because it looks like a green in the pan, but it doesn't quite swatch like that, or it doesn't really look like that when you have it on the eye. Kind of does in the swatch. Just take my word for it. I'm very trustworthy. But I think this one definitely has a much better colour story. It performs better than the rest. So this is it without any sort of primer. Now bear in mind, my brush is pretty filthy at this point, and I'm too lazy to clean it between takes, because, you know, that's just my life. I know they say you're meant to like clean your brushes every week. I mean, I'm lucky if I do it every 2 weeks. Does anyone else struggle with cleaning their brushes? Because it is just the most mundane thing ever. Like, it is just, it's up there with, like, I don't know, ironing or something. Although I'd sooner take ironing actually than cleaning brushes. I find it so tedious. You can see there, it's performing quite well with the brush swatches. Now I find you do have to be more heavy-handed with the Huda Neon because it just, like, normally I'm very light-handed, but I think to get any sort of pigment from this you do have to go in very, very heavy, which is strange. Yeah, you can see there it doesn't kind of come across quite as green, more orangey. Which I suppose makes sense because it's an orange palette, but at the same time it looks green in the pan. So now we're going to do the base, the white base. I'm sure there are much better primers out there, but this is the one I tend to use because I'm cheap. There, that performs really pretty under, or rather on, a primer. It gives you really nice pigmentation. I think out of all of them, the orange one performs the best. So if you were kind of torn between all 3, I would recommend the orange one. Not just because it has the best colour story, it gives you the most variety. You aren't going to end up with the same look at every single time. Although I will say it's still not fantastic, and it will still only give you so many looks. The other ones, you're very, very limited in what you can actually create. This has far more versatility in what it can offer. So you can see they're swatching really nicely. Now we're on to it. It has a lovely purple, because like I'm saying, this kind of has a little bit more depth and difference in this palette. I think this is, out of all of them, the most interesting. To me, in my opinion, it is the most interesting one. And it blends so much better than the other 2, so I don't know what they were doing and why the formulas are so incredibly different. And I will say, this shade here is very similar to the first and the third pink that's in the neon pink. So if there's no point buying all 3 like I did. I just did this because I wanted to see what the story was. Yeah, so as you can see from there, that is not a green. It looks like a green, but it's not. But that could be actually just my damned brush at this point. I'll swatch it again just to give it, yeah, it's a bit more green there. I think that's just my brush being contaminated, so don't 100% take me at my word there. So that gives you a general idea. It swatches really nicely, much better colour story. I think there's a lot more going for the orange one than the rest.
I think that out of all three of the eyeshadow palettes, the orange neon palette seems to perform the best, in my opinion. It gives you the most diversity in terms of shades, because you have like a lovely kind of a yellow there, a purple. This is a strange green. It sometimes performs as a green and then sometimes it doesn't, but then it has these nice kind of like deeper oranges, and they do blend much better than the other two. I think there's a definite difference in terms of the formula between the three eyeshadow palettes, and this is definitely the best. For £27, I don't know if it's necessarily worth it. I think it's nice, but I don't think it's nice enough to spend that amount of money, particularly now when we have the likes of Colourpop that are able to have their 9pan monochromatic palettes. They've recently come out with the yellow, which I've ordered and I'm super excited about. But they're able to produce those for $12, which is more than half the price of this. So I think that you can definitely get a lot better for a lot less, in my opinion. So I was trying to think as to whether or not there are any dupes of these palettes. Now, there's nothing that has the exact same colour story, but if we're even just thinking in terms of wanting neon colours, there are some really great alternatives. One of the first things that kind of came to mind was the Melt Radioactive Stack. These only have 4 shades in them, but they are truly neon. So we have like even this bright orange, which I think is called Radon. We have this bright pink, which is called Radioactive. We have this very, very vivid yellow, which is called Neon, and then this green, which is called Xenex. So you can kind of see these kind of really have the spirit of neon. So if it is a true neon that you're looking for, these are expensive. I think it's like €40 or something like that. I kind of dip in between talking about euros and pounds because I'm traversing the two countries, so I get a bit confused. But I think these are a really nice alternative if you want something truly neon, and they do blend really, really well. I think the Melt formulas, it is very, very good, and sometimes they're on sale, because I remember I got this for 30% off on Beauty Bay, which stocks Melt at the moment. Another one for if you genuinely want a more neon one is, of course, the Blush Tribe Neon Dreams. This is a 9pan palette, and I think they're still stocking it on their website. And again, this has some very, very neon looks. You can see this orange is very similar to the orange from the Neon Orange set. We've some pinks there, again very similar to the pink from the pink neon. We've a purple here, which is almost from the orange neon set, and we've a lovely vibrant green, which I think is even nicer than the green that is in the neon green eyeshadow palette. So I think this is about £20, maybe £21.99, because they're an English site, so it's all in pounds. So I would say, like, this is already £5 cheaper than the Huda. It is better quality. Granted, you don't have any shimmers. These are all matte formulas, but I think these are miles better, because even within the Huda Neon, the shimmer formulas aren't truly neon colours. They're much darker, so you probably already have some shimmers in your collection that you can use for that purpose. There's also the Pinky Rose Bright Lights collection. Again, this is not a dupe, but it gives the same sort of spirit of general like brightness. You can see there's that lovely yellow, there's this really vibrant green, you have your purples, your oranges, your pinks, that are all quite similar in a way, at least in essence, to the orange palette. So I'm going to hold that up. And you can kind of see like this shade here and this shade are very, very similar. These two shades are very similar, that one and this one, which is called Dreamsicle. So there is quite a bit of overlap in that sense. So again, I think that the formula on this is 1,000 times better. They're an American site, so beware. If you're in the EU, you are going to have to pay some VAT. So it may appear as though it's cheaper, but you are going to have to pay VAT. So do keep that in mind. But I do think the formula is a lot better, and there's a much more interesting colour story than in any of the Huda neons. Recently Colourpop did a headliner palette. Now granted, this is like 67% glitters, which I love. So if you want to have your shimmers, your glitters, etc., this is a good alternative. But you can see here it has some very, very, very vibrant, like green, orange, red, or not red, pink and purple. And again, if we take out, we'll take out the pink one. So if we look at that pink, those two pinks, they're very, very similar. The purples, that is just a dead on match to each other. And even you see this pinky shimmer is actually probably not as nice as the pinky shimmer that is in Colourpop. So I think it's a much better alternative. If we're looking at the green, you can see even the green in the Huda isn't very whatever, but you can see that there's actually a fairly decent shade match between the two of those. So if you wanted something like that, I think it works out a bit better. I think this is currently about $40 on the Colourpop website, so that's about, oh god, that'd be about £32. So it's a smidgen dearer, and then you also have to deal with VAT, but I do think that the quality is just 1,000 times better. Finally, we have the Slush palette, which is a biggie, and normally I don't like big palettes that much, considering I have quite a few of them in my collection, but let's not talk about that. There are some definite dupes in here in terms of the general colour stories. So you can see even here we have our greens, we have our oranges, like there's a very, very, I think that's orange soda, it is super, super vibrant. So if we're looking at that and comparing it to the orange in the Huda Beauty, you can see they're pretty much dead on in terms of colour. We've the purples here, they're very, very similar. There's a nice deep yellow in there. We have our greens, we have our pinks, we have some shimmers. So again, if you were trying to make sure that you got your shimmers, they're in there. So my general thoughts are on the Huda Neon trio. Pass on them. I don't think they're worth the money. I know that in the States, in Sephora, if you're not happy with your purchases, you can actually return those. If that was the case here, because I bought these on Cult Beauty, I would return these. I did not. They're all right, but I have a lot of eyeshadow, obviously, and I didn't think it was worth the money. So general advice, pass, move on, get something else. Hope you enjoyed, and hope that might help you in terms of purchasing decisions. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.